Hi, Chrissy. Welcome to the show. To say that I am, oh my goodness, humbled and excited and honored to have you here. I just cannot wait to have this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here, Vanessa.
Oh, it really is an honor. And I know we were chatting off air. It's like we've known each other only a little while, and I feel like we've known each other for years. And I feel like your story and everything surrounding Yulia is just a story that if people don't know about it, they need to know about it. There's so much purpose to you sharing, and I cannot wait for you to enlighten our listeners on everything that you have to share and also all the wisdom you have to offer. So I'm so excited.
I am too, Vanessa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just literally dive right into it. Why don't I know you've done a lot of media engagements over the years. You've shared the story, and I really just want for those that do not know you, do not know your family, your husband, your daughter. Why don't you give us just a rundown of the backstory? Who are you guys? How did Yulia come into your life, and so forth?
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I've been on a lot of media things, but I think we talked about this the first time we came on that I feel like now is time for the victory tour. Like it's time for us to give the glory to God because that is, sorry, it's so early and we're already in tears. That's who
It's
provided
okay.
all of this for us. So my husband and I are both veterans. My husband served 28 years. I served 4 and got out. We have 8 bio children. We met Yulia and her bio brother Ivan or Vanya. I'll call him both through the interview. He was Vanya, but then when he got older, he wanted to be Ivan again. So one Christmas, the honest to goodness truth is, one Christmas I didn't want to buy Christmas presents, and so I said, "Let's host an orphan from the Ukraine." And my kids all thought I'd lost my mind, but they're like, "Okay, mom, sounds good." So the girls I had at that point, I had 5 boys and 2 girls, and the girls said, "No more boys, mom. We have to host a girl." So I said, "Okay." So that's when we met Anastasia, the first girl that we adopted from the Ukraine. And while she was visiting, I found out I was pregnant with number 8 because God has a sense of humor. And we knew immediately, like within a couple of days, that Anastasia needed to be part of our family. But because I was pregnant, I didn't go back to the Ukraine for any of the things. My husband always went back to try to get, to do all the paperwork that needed to be done for Anastasia to come home. And Yulia and her brother Ivan were being adopted at the same time to a family in Raleigh. So they spent a lot of time together. And my another daughter, one of our bio daughters, was in Ukraine with my husband, and he kept saying, like, "I love Yulia. She's so sweet." I'm like, "Well, that's great, but we can't adopt her. She's being adopted by somebody else." So anyway, when she came home, then time kind of went by. We heard about Yulia having her kidney problem because my oldest adopted daughter, Anastasia, actually wanted to test and see if she could be her donor because we did know that Yulia was going to need a transplant at some point. But fast forward 2 years, we're in life, doing life, and I'm sitting on the couch one evening. It was January 8th of 2021. And I get a phone call from a lady who was part of the adoption agency. And she said, how far are you from Raleigh? And I said, well, like an hour, hour and a half. Like, are you coming in? Can I meet you? Like, she said, no. Do you think you could pick up Yulia and Vanya from the airport in 3 hours? And so I was like, what? And she was like, it's a long story. Can you just pick them up, keep them for the weekend, and we'll figure it out? And so my husband and I were like, okay. We rearranged the house in 3 hours so that they would have their own bedroom because we didn't really know these kids. And it was a little bit scary to bring a Ukrainian boy into my house, to be honest with you, a teenage boy, especially because they told us he didn't speak English, that he was still only speaking Russian. So come to find out, what had happened was they were with that family for about a year. And Ivan went back to Ukraine, and Yulia went to live with a family in Arizona. And they wanted to adopt Yulia. But because Ivan was not 18, they needed to get him back from the Ukraine so that they could adopt both of them. So once Ivan came, you have a boy who's been living on his own, who's 17 in the Ukraine. So just kind of paint that picture in your mind, kind of how Ivan was.
Wow.
And so the family realized it was just too much for them. And so they put them on a plane to go back to Raleigh. And that family refused to pick them up. And so that's why we got the call. And because we knew of Yulia Singh, they were like, look, if she goes into foster care, she's not going to make it because she's, on medication. And so anyway, so we took them for the weekend. And there had been a family, I guess, out of Georgia that had been watching their story the whole time, like through the hosting. And they reached out to us and they wanted to come up and meet them to possibly adopt them. Originally, it's funny because right away, Anastasia never wanted to have any other adopted kids in the family. The oldest adopted, she was like, I'm the only one. I think it was the one thing that made her special in a family of so many children. And right away she was like, Mom, can we adopt them? And I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. I was not on board. I was like, we have 9 children. I homeschool my kids. Like, I don't think I can take on one more thing. And knowing Yulia already had, a chronic illness, like, what did that look like? Like, anyway, so I was a little bit hesitant. So the family came up. They loved them. Yulia and Vanya loved the family. It looked like it was going to be a go. But my whole thing was I had a prayer, and my prayer was, God, I'm not getting into a custody battle with this other family. If they want them, then that's where they're going to go. If we're supposed to adopt them, I need them to say no. Like, I'm not going to fight them. And so they came up, they left, and they didn't like call me again. And so after a week, I was like, what's going on? So I called her. I was like, I was just checking in to see how things are going. And she's like, it's so crazy. We keep praying and we just keep hearing no. And I was like, and she's like, I don't understand it. I'm like, I understand it. Like, I know what's going on. So, okay. Anyway, so at that point we decided, yes, we're going to adopt them. But I was still, anxious because we had spent tens of thousands of dollars to get Anastasia home. I mean, we're a huge family. We're not financially wealthy. So I'm like, how are we going to afford to adopt 2 more children? I know, granted, it's not as much because they're already in America, but it's, adoption is not cheap. And so I reached out to the lady who had, with the adoption agency, and miracle number 50,000, she put out a post, and the money to the exact cent that we needed to do our home study to adopt these children was covered.
No way.
To the exact dollar.
Wow.
Like,
I did not know that about your story. Wow.
Yes. So that was like, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. Then the other thing was, so once we got them in the home and we realized they're going to be with us for a little bit longer, I got her back to Duke immediately because I knew that's where she had been seen before. I didn't know what her kidney function looked like. And I think when we went up there and they tested her, she was at like, it was low, like 13% function. Like, she's a miracle because that function should have you in bed all the time. And Yulia was bouncing around on the trampoline. Like, she didn't even look sick. Like, people really didn't believe me that she was really that sick. So anyway, so Duke said, she needs dialysis, but she cannot have dialysis until she has a stable home environment. And I think at that point, we'd already decided we were going to adopt her. And so our prayer was like, just let this go quickly, because I don't know how much people know about adoptions in America, but they are not quick.
No.
Not at all. No. So 90 days later, so April 23rd, it was final that they were adopted. Like, it gives me goosebumps to think, because God was just orchestrating all of this, and like, people think, oh, you're a hero. I'm like, no, I'm really not. Like, I'm such a fallen person and I sin so much, but I just kept saying yes. Like, that's all you have to do. Just keep saying yes. Like, okay, we're going to walk through this door now. We're going to walk through this door. And so Yulia got her port placed. It was probably early July when she went in to get her port placed, because we did home dialysis. So she was getting it through her belly every night at home. And we started, I do know the date we start was August 2nd of 2021. Because that was one of my son's birthdays. So Yulia started her dialysis then. And even through dialysis, it was like miracle after miracle, because people get sick, they get infections, she never had anything really go awry. We missed one dialysis treatment in the almost 2 years that we did dialysis because we were selling our home and our realtor locked us out of our house. We were coming back from a trip and we couldn't get in. And so she missed that night. But other than that, Yulia never missed a treatment. She never complained. She's just the most joyful person you've ever met. I mean, really, she's been passed around. She didn't have a good life in Ukraine. Like, she really, if anybody has a reason to be bitter, it's Yulia. Right. And you will never see that from her. It's always a smile, just so grateful to be, I don't know. She's just amazing. So the port was placed. We did 2 years. It was a little bit hard. I mean, they started pressuring us for the vaccine the day it was approved for children. Mm-hmm. We were at an appointment at Duke and they said, it got approved today for teenagers. Let's give it to her. And I said, no, let's not. Like, we're going to wait. There's not a lot of data on this shot yet. And we're just going to wait. And then in that time frame, she got COVID and she recovered within 24 hours. I mean, she had like a fever, sniffles.
Like a lot of children do, not to cut you off, but like, I mean, that was the case and is the case, I think, with a lot of children that we see, is that they.
And what's amazing is Julia, like, never gets sick. Like, she was supposedly this like immunocompromised, like, frail. she never gets anything. Like, she's like, what's wrong with you guys? Like, everything's fine. Anyway, so she got over it. We kept pushing forward. They started getting a little bit. So I don't know if you know this, but I actually have my doctorate in physical therapy.
Oh, you told me that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I am medically trained. And so, but it was almost worse that I was, because then they'd be like, why are you denying your training? Like, vaccines work. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer. My kids have never gotten the MMR, the varicella, because of the aborted fetal cell lines that are in it. But we vaccinated our kids with other vaccines. We were not anti-vax, as people like to label us. I'm becoming more anti-vax because I don't know what they're putting in them anymore. And I've seen like the fruits of what have happened from them. But they kind of would pressure me. So I would get to the point where I'm like, honey, I can't take her this month. Like, can you take her to the appointment? And so my husband would take her. And of course, there was never any pressuring for him. Never. Which is very odd to me.
That's
But
interesting, but I think that's not uncommon, which is
right,
really, really sad. And I feel like there are people who are among the medical industry or work as practitioners and so forth that had this extra pressure because they were thinking like, wait, a lot of this doesn't sound right. And so they would question it, and then they would come down harder on these people, these practitioners,
for
in your
sure.
case, or doctors even that were starting to question, because it's like, hey, you know better, like you should just know. And it's like, well,
Right.
how, actually, no, we don't know in this case, right? We don't really know. This
Exactly.
is totally different and a bit unique.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but they kept saying like, no vaccine, no transplant. And I just kept saying, well, we'll see. We'll just see when we get closer. We just kept, just keep on keeping on. We don't know what the future looks like, whatever. And there was one point in there where I really wanted a miracle. I'm like, I don't want to have her lived with this chronic. I mean, it's a chronic illness, and like kidney transplant is not a cure. It's just a different treatment, right?
Right.
And so I kept praying, like, God, I really want a miracle. Like, if we can just heal her kidneys, like, would be amazing. Like, that'd be awesome. And like I was telling you, sometimes people would contact me and I don't know where they got my number. So this woman contacted me and she was telling me about these LifeWave patches. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're like
I
wellness.
have. Yep, I have.
And so my thought was, okay, these help with stem cells. So hers is a genetic disorder. So her, if, if this makes her worse, first of all, these work, but then it's kind of my answer. Like, yeah, there's really no way to cure her. And so, I mean, they helped my husband and I, we've been using them since, but it was making her worse. So then I was like, okay, these really work because it's a genetic disorder. So obviously, if you increase stem cells, it's going to attack her kidney more, which is exactly what happened. So,
Interesting.
yes, so twofold, like, it was my answer, like, okay, we're going to have to go to transplant because they're really short of God coming down and just curing her. Like, there's really nothing left out there for her. We've tried everything. And so that's when we realized it was about the same time that they said, okay, it's time for you to go for your last like big visit to move to transplant. And there had not been any talk of vaccine for a couple visits. So we thought, okay, let's just go. We met with the infectious disease doctor, and my husband said point blank, is this a requirement at Duke? And he said, it's not. I wish I could make it, but it's not a requirement. And so it gave us a little bit of hope, like, okay, well, maybe it's going to be okay. And then we met with the head of transplant. She was like, no, absolutely. She's not getting it without. And so we
Not to stop you, but like, okay, so it's not required, but they require it. Like, how does that make
So
sense?
it was all semantics. I don't know if you ever heard the talk with Tucker Carlson. Like, we recorded the phone call from Duke, and it says in there, my husband says, so you're saying this is a requirement? And she would say, no, it's not a requirement. It's a recommendation. But if you don't follow it, you can't get a transplant at Duke. Like, those are literally her words. That is semantics. Like, that's a requirement, lady.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And the crazy thing is that a man got an unvaccinated transplant 2 weeks after they denied us from Duke.
So that was okay for some patients, but not for others. And how did they explain that to you?
They didn't. They didn't have to. They didn't feel like they didn't have to. Like, that's just. So that happened. I had a couple friends that were in media. Like, one of my friends has a national file. He knew Stu Peters. So we had an interview with Stu Peters. And then, do you know who Alex Berenson is? He's big on Substack.
It sounds familiar. Yes, it
Yeah,
sounds
that I
familiar.
didn't know who he was. So he called me and he was like, I heard about your story. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know who you are. Like, are you friendly to me or not? Like,
Right.
afterwards, when I find out who he is, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. Because no, I'm just living my life. Like, I'm not in social media. Like, you can see my social media presence is not huge. Like, I don't have time for it, you
I
know?
know.
I
You
mostly
don't
do
have
it to,
time with 11 children? What do you
no,
mean? What do you
you know
mean?
what I use it for? I use it to like journal my own life. So like I can look back a year later and say, oh, this is what we were doing. This is where we were, and look at pictures. Like that's literally why I post stuff on Facebook. But
Yeah.
anyway, so he put out our story and it went viral. Like that's when it really like it blew up. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I guess this. And one of my friends from Notre Dame, one of my friends was like, Chrissy, you don't know who he is? I'm like, no. He's like, you're gonna be on Tucker Carlson. I'm like, okay, whatever. And sure enough, that week I get a call from Tucker Carlson's people, like, will you go on our show? Which was a huge blessing to us. So the first night we went up there, you know, it got canceled because something else blew up, WikiLeaks or something. And it was funny because they called us and they're like, we're really sorry you didn't get on. I'm like, what do you mean? You're doing me a favor. And they're like, well, most guests get angry and scream at us. I'm like, what? Like, you're putting my story out there for my daughter to get a kidney. Like, I'm fine, whatever
I'll
it
show
takes.
up whenever you need me to show up.
Yes,
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
my airtime and I will do it.
Yeah.
And so then after Tucker's, you know, the whole thing blew up after that. And um, our goals were like to find a place to have it, to find a donor. We had a third goal, I can't remember what it was. And then the fourth goal was like to sue Duke, but that was like the bottom of our total poll, like, okay, whatever. And that is when we were contacted by our lawyer, and Mike Yoder, which unfortunately was not a good situation. He told us a lot of things. He filed incorrectly, and he's since been banned in the state of Virginia. He had his license pulled, which is interesting because his firm is trying to help Lexi. We can talk about her in a minute, out in California. So
Oh,
anyway,
Alexis Lorenz. Yeah.
yes. So
The
his firm,
UCI situation that's happening this. Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah.
it's
Wow. Okay.
crazy.
Yeah.
So
That is
anyway,
crazy.
I don't know. He must just because he's merged with another firm. Maybe that's the license they're using. But I would be very wary if anybody is listening and can contact her about using that firm. But anyway, so we got on Tucker, and then we found ECU, which ironically is my husband's alma mater. Amazing hospital. They kind of get the bad rap in North Carolina because it's all Duke and UNC, and ECU is like in the country. They were amazing, top-notch facility. Yulia had about 30 or 40 people who came forward to try to be her donor, which is absolutely, yeah,
Because of Tucker.
because
Yeah.
of Tucker. I mean, maybe because of Alex, like who knows exactly which media outlet they saw.
Sure.
And so they were able to be really picky about who her donor was, because they're like, we don't want somebody over the age of 50 because then it doesn't last as long, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And so this man came forward. All we know is his initials are JJ, and he's from Kentucky. But we were told that he was going to work in Alaska for the summer. And so we said, okay, so we assume he wants to do it after that, because why would he want to have a transplant and then go do hard labor in Alaska for the summer? And so we said to ECU, can we just keep looking then for another donor? Because you have all these other people. Can we work up, you know, some other people? Because it would be beneficial for us to do it over the summer, given kids in college and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happened in the end was the NKR, I don't know if you know this part, but the National Kidney Registry stole our kidney.
I did hear that portion as well. Yeah, I did hear
Yes.
that on another media engagement that you did.
Okay.
I remember that. And yeah, go ahead. Tell the rest of the
Yeah.
story.
So the doctor called me. It was a Friday, and I was hysterical because I'm like, we have gone through so much. Like, this is the kidney that matches her. Like, how can they do this? And the doctor tried to convince me that it would be fine if she had a vaccinated kidney. But I had just met a woman whose son got a vaccinated kidney. It nearly killed him. And so I was like, I can't. Like, I was just literally had to just come in my room and shut the door and just cry, because I'm like, you got us this far. Like, I know that you will get us through, but I don't know how that looks. And literally my husband called me 30 minutes later and he said, the doctor just called me and we're going to go for our final evaluation on Monday, and she'll have her transplant next week. And I was like, Lee, I just got off the phone with the doctor. I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, I know, he called me back. So what happened, and I have to give props to this doctor, they called the NKR and said, how do you can't steal the, and they're like, just find another one, you know, whatever. And so they said, fine, call the donor and tell him that his kidney is not going to Yulia and see what he says. And they did. And he said, no, I came into this because of Yulia. So if it's not going to Yulia, I'm not doing it.
Another miracle. Another miracle.
Yeah.
For sure.
Another miracle.
Yeah.
Yes.
What a
Around.
blessing of a person too.
Yes. And it's amazing what they can do now too. So like, I always thought that per donor would be in the room, you know, separate operating rooms, and it gets walked across. No, he had his surgery so he's in Kentucky, but it was like north of Kentucky where he went. fluid. We were tracking it, GPS. We knew exactly where the kidney was, when we had to get there. And so we get there, they pull her back, and Lee and I, like, we thought it was going to be a really long surgery. They told us it will take a couple hours. So we left to get something to eat. We went to go pray, and we come back to the hospital, and surgeon's walking down the hallway. We're like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "It's done. She's already making urine. Everything's perfect." Like, the other surgeon is sewing her up because she wants to make it look prettier because it's a girl. Amazing.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And never any complications. So a kidney transplant with no complications is 3 weeks in the hospital. Yulia was out in 3 days. 3 days.
Just another, I mean, it's so crazy. And I know that you have more to share, but just up until this point, I mean, if we're talking about miracles from start to this point, if you just track how many
10.
things were not supposed to work out that worked out. I mean, it's very, very, very clear as day that this was so beautifully orchestrated. Just from the get go. It's like nothing makes sense because it feels like everything was not supposed to be what it is.
Nothing was supposed to be. And also, like, we don't know anybody. Like, literally, we're nobodies. Like, how did we end up on the national news? Like, because God, and this is what I kept saying, like, I don't know why God put us in this position, but it's not just for us. Like, He wants us to be a megaphone to expose this what it is, this demonic agenda to kill people. Like, there's no other way to explain it
Yeah.
but that. And so we just I really, like, don't like media engagements for the most part. Like, you can ask my family, they're like, "Mom's a mess the week before," because I don't like it. But then I'm just like, okay, whatever you need me to say, Holy Spirit, like, I'm here, I'm your instrument. Just tell me what I need to say. And so she came out of the transplant. Amazing. Like, never any medicine. Like, a lot of times, she's on two different medications for anti-rejection. And that takes a long time to, like, balance out, like, not with Yulia. Like, everything has been fine. They're doing micro rejection tests on her, never any problem. We all got the stomach blood recently, not Yulia. She was totally fine. Like, it's a miracle. Like, it really is just a miracle what's happened with Yulia.
So how is she today? What is her status? I mean, currently, like, is she able to do all the things that is she 15 now?
She's 16 now.
16
Yep.
now. So,
Mhm.
she's, I mean, right in the middle of teenage years. I mean, what's her status and what does it look like moving forward? And what can she, like, does she still have to be careful with certain things? Like, how does that go?
So, actually, today, Yulia had her first horseback riding lesson since she went to transplant. She loves horses, loves animals. And it was what she really, really wanted to do, but we couldn't get her back until a year, they said, because, the stitching into the vessels and stuff, they didn't want the bouncing. Yulia is super close with her, I guess it would be her nephew. My oldest daughter is married and has a little boy and loves Yulia. He loves her so much. She takes whenever he needs to go to sleep. We're like, get Auntie Yu. Like, she needs to put him to sleep. So she does that. She has a lot of good friends. The other part of Yulia's diagnosis is that she will go blind. And so what happens is the body attacks the rods, which are the outer ones and the black and white in your eye. And the cones are the prima donnas. So once those rods die off, the cones also will. And so she will eventually end up blind. And so right now we're trying to actually find a low vision therapist. We've been to many doctors, but they're so rare to find a low vision therapist. And so that's what I'm in the process of right now, is trying to get her in to get her the tools she needs. So that as it progresses, eventually she'll have a seeing eye dog, which is going to be amazing for her because like I said, she loves animals.
Yeah.
But she is on a lot of supplements that have maintained that, like, she has not declined in a year. So we're hoping we can stretch that out some. She's a sophomore in high school, and we were just talking about what she wants to do. She thinks she wants to be a nurse. But Amy Coney Barrett, when she went up to be the Supreme Court justice, one of her paralegals is blind. So I'm like, the sky's the limit, really. Like, I can't see if Julia is called to do it, God will find a way for her. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Does she have any vision, any diminished vision at this point, or is it still like all good?
it's slightly, but on top of it, she had a lazy eye. So it's like kind
Okay.
of compounded it. So she does have a little bit of, like, depth perception issues.
Uh huh.
But she's still doing her school. I mean, she wears glasses to read, but other than that, you would not guess it.
Wow.
So no, she's pretty good. I'm hoping they say 21 she should be blind, but I'm hoping we've already pushed it out a couple of years, you
Yeah.
know?
I think anything's possible at this point. Look at
Yeah.
everything that's transpired. I mean, I say we just continue to pray for the miracle that it doesn't happen because,
Exactly. Wouldn't that be
yeah,
amazing?
yeah, it would
Yes,
be absolutely amazing. And I am in full belief, as you know, that something like that can absolutely occur. So we're going to stick,
for sure.
I'm going to stick
For
with that. I'm going to stick with that. I want to go back for a second because, as you were talking, I had this thought, like, wow, she is, well, your husband, Lee, and you guys went through so much, and your family too. I mean, goodness, like all the kids and, this busy life, and, you're just what you would call ordinary people. I don't particularly look at you or your husband as ordinary. I think you guys are extraordinary. And I've never really, I mean, I feel like true angels on earth. But was there at any point, like in the process, like even, prior to her transplant, when you were going back and forth with Duke, was there any point that you felt like, you know what, maybe we should just give it to her? Like maybe we should just give her the vax, or maybe we should just like, because I could assume that there are probably people listening, and even me, just as a human being. I mean, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, if my daughter, because blood or no blood, she is your daughter through and through at this point. Um, this is like a life or death situation. Like we might have to just choose it because it's like the lesser of two, or whatever the case is. Was there any at any time a point where you felt that way?
You know what's crazy is that no, never. We were so against that vaccine. But I always felt like she was going to be okay. Like I never even worried like this isn't going to work out. I I was like God's going to provide a way. Like he's just going to. It sounds almost arrogant, but like I just had so much faith in that he would not have brought us this far. And there was a reason for all of it. You know what I mean? And I think I said this to you before offline. Like when the vaccine first came out, we didn't even have Yulia when the vaccine first came out, which is even crazier. Like
Right.
we didn't even know. And I was like, we fought vaccine mandates for colleges for our kids to go to college. We had a wonderful doctor who wrote, notes saying like they can't have it because my son is an athlete and they were the guys who were getting the myocarditis. Um, but I was like, we're just going to quietly fight. Like, God, I'm against this, but I'm not going to be vocal about it. He's like, no, no, actually, you're going to go on Tucker Carlson and tell the world how you feel about this vaccine. I'm like, okay. But yeah, like, it's a weird sense of like, just beyond understanding. Like, how were we not worried? Like, and I know this is a big thing with Yulia's law. Like, doctors and lawmakers, they think it's not an issue anymore because you don't see as many people. The people are being denied for it, but they're just taking it. And we're no better than they were, but I get it. I get where they're coming from. And if you don't know and you're just so scared for your child, like, I don't want to be the reason they die. I'm going to give them the shot. Um, but
It's
there's still people
understandable.
out.
It's understandable why someone would comply. I mean, I mean, and I realize there are people out there that just are like pro, just get all the boosters, get all the things. But
Yes.
those that are not in that realm or in that camp, I can see how one would. I mean, I have friends and family who were completely against it and ended up making a choice because they had to go visit somebody in the hospital, a spouse, or a sibling, and they were like, "What? My hands are tied." That's how
Mhm.
they, that's just how they felt. So I completely understand it.
And I'm here by Fort Bragg. They mandated it on all the military people here. And so there's a lot of people here who didn't want it that got it and are now paying the price for it. Like their health has declined because of it.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to say something else when you said that, but I can't remember what it was.
No worries.
Uh,
No worries. It'll
anyway,
come back.
yeah.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
how?
I know. So
Oh,
there's
go ahead.
actually not just the COVID vaccine, like there are kids being denied because they didn't give their kids the MMR or the varicella. For people who don't know, you can go look it up. There's a website called Children of God for Life, and they will lay out all the vaccines and which ones have aborted fetal cell lines in them. And those are two of the ones that have it. And so when all this went down, somehow a man in South Carolina found me. We've been talking for a long time because his grandson, Graham, needed to have a transplant and nobody would touch him anywhere. And Pittsburgh's Children's Hospital, which I want to do a shout out to them too, because they have said they will take anybody, even if they don't have their regular childhood vaccines, they will do transplants. And so we need to give them that publicity. And so Graham got his there. He's doing wonderfully. And I was contacted about, the time flies by so quickly. I believe it was early summer. I was contacted by someone else in New Jersey. They wanted to take her son, like, what is it, like medical kidnapping,
Yeah,
essentially,
that's what it's
because,
called.
because she would not give him, his name is Kyle, the MMR and the varicella. And so someone else in Chicago heard my story and connected us together. And I connected her with the pastor down in South Carolina. And this little boy, Kyle, is going to transplant on October 4th. So we haven't talked about the Facebook page yet, but yes, we're going to all be praying for this little boy to make it through his transplant safely too.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about the Facebook page towards the end of this
Yeah.
discussion. But wow, that is see how things work though. It's like, you're over here in this house, like busy with your kids, and you're like, I just want to live quietly, and it's like, no, there's other plans for you. But look at the lives that have been affected. And here's the thing: you've spoken on so many media spots. You've had so many media engagements in the last couple of years. The reality is you have no idea that trickle down effect. You have no idea the amount of people that you and your husband have touched because of your voice, despite, being a little intimidated, or despite being like, yeah, no, I don't really have time for this, because let's be honest, you guys might be the busiest family I know. But it's like, let's tack on like this one more thing, which is this huge thing, right? And it takes a lot to do that and to have courage. But obviously you've been, carried through it, as you told me offline. And, it's just amazing. I mean, I can't even imagine how many people have changed their thought process, changed their decisions, changed their outlook, or potentially knew somebody that was going through something, whether it's transplant or other, that were affected by your story.
And that's what keeps us going. Like, a lot of times when I'm like, I told my husband, like, that's the most important thing to me, is like when I hear these stories of people who've gotten transplants because of like, there's another hospital in Dallas that will help people. We had a list of all the ones, and there's another girl in Arizona who got her transplant last summer. Like, that is what makes it worth it. Like, every life matters. And we know at least 4 or 5 lives that were saved from us speaking up. And that is enough. Like, that's enough.
It's amazing. It's what, and I say, it's funny. I had a discussion here at some point on the podcast with some guest. I cannot remember who, but it's like, we get so wrapped up sometimes in like, oh, I hope that people receive the message, and I hope it reaches all ends of the earth and so forth. And I literally think I said on air, if it's one person that hears this show and there's one download and it makes a difference, then amen. Right?
Yep.
Amen. No matter what the subject matter. No matter what the subject matter. So tell us a little bit about the law. So what is going on currently? How is that going? What has transpired with Yulia's law? Give us a little bit of detail there so that we can be aware and also know what to do moving forward if people want to support you through this.
Okay. So yeah, Yulia's law was very simple. It was basically like, you cannot be denied a transplant because of your COVID vaccination status, which my husband and I discussed this recently. Like, that actually may end up helping people who have been vaccinated too down the road, because if it comes out, they could say, well, sorry, you're not no longer, so really it was both sided, but we didn't realize it when it was written. And it passed the House very quickly. So we had been contacted by a lot of representatives and senators through this whole process that promised us the world, like, we're going to do this stuff. And of course, nothing happened. So when we got a call from a freshman representative in North Carolina, Celeste Kearns is her name, and she said she was going to do this, we kind of said, okay, sure you are. Like, everybody tells us they're going to do this and they don't. And 2 weeks later, she sends me, like, it passed the House. Like, it was like overwhelmingly both sides. It was bipartisan. And then it went to the Rules Committee and died in the Senate. So a lot of what we've learned through this is how powerful 1 or 2 people can be to stop. Like, one man who's in charge of the Rules Committee has decided that it was not going to be heard, and it died. So it went to committee to die, never was heard on the floor of the Senate. It would have passed. Like, we went up and lobbied. We have another good friend. Her name is Lori Raymond, who I've met through all of this. She started the And Children's Fund to help orphans who need help with medical care. And she was also part of George W. Bush's cabinet. And she's amazing. And she put us in touch with, I'm sure some people have heard of Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, and he is part of her group. It's called ACRU, American Civil Rights Union. And they gave us a lobbyist. Yes, out of Texas. Yeah. And they gave us a lobbyist named Michael, who has helped us. He went with us. We walked, the North Carolina House and Senate, and there was overwhelming support for us. Like, they all said, what's crazy? How God works is that this Rules Committee guy, no one gets in to see him without an appointment. And I was like, let's just walk by his office. Like, and they're kind of like, Chrissy, you're crazy. I'm like, I just want to see what it looks like. Let's walk by. And he was in the doorway, and we just backed up. He came out to talk to us, said he had never heard about our bill, which could be true, because a lot of stuff just gets buried. And was, supportive of it, but of course it never went anywhere. But to me, it was just a miracle. Like God was saying, just, in time, just give it time, because we should have never met him. Like there's no way he should have walked out when we were standing there.
Right.
And so now where the law is, that it's died in North Carolina because it can only go through so many sessions, and so it died. And so we are kind of pulling back a little bit, trying to figure out the best course forward. But we really want to try to get this law into other states and maybe even expand it, because the next thing that we haven't talked about yet, though, is blood donation.
Yes.
So
That's
I don't know if you've talked about that on other podcasts.
Well,
but
I have not in detail, but I have actually had personal experience with this. I'll just share it really quick for those who
yeah,
might be new to listen, because I feel like I might have mentioned it on one other show. It's something that I don't bring up that much because, there is a little bit of anxiety there, but I know that, God's got her covered. But my mom actually had a fall a couple of years ago. Her and my father were walking for exercise. They're very active people. And my dad accidentally clipped the back of my mom's shoe, and she fell and broke the top of her femur. And it resulted in a hip replacement. So long story longer, I happened to be in the hospital with her. This was in 2022, so that was still kind of a weird time. We weren't letting more than 2 people in per day. I don't know if that's changed. And I happened to be the one there that day, all day. And they came in and they were like, your mom is losing a lot of blood, and she needs a transfusion. And it was a situation where I had to make a call, and my mom was actually the one going, but wait, Vanessa, but wait. And it was this back and forth thing. I mean, I was in the bathroom praying. I was on the phone with my holistic practitioner, who I called on a Saturday night at 7 p.m., where he picked up and took my call. And I was like, I need somebody who's out of this circle, who can talk me down, give me advice. I need help, But I had to make a call with her in that time, in that moment, about blood donation. And we ended up giving her the transfusion. And I just felt this peace come over me, like, she's going to be taken care of, Vanessa. She's going to be taken care of. I'm going to take care of this for you. But it was so stressful because we were pushing back, and the staff was like, we don't understand the problem here. Like they were definitely like, come on, like this is evidently just a no-brainer. And I was like, is it a no-brainer though? Is it a no-brainer? So I have been down that road personally with my own mom, and was extremely conflicted at the time.
yes, because they don't tell you whether or not the blood has
They
been.
would not.
What's crazy is, and it's a whole nother like thing we won't go down, but like if you get a deceased organ, they don't tell you if the person was COVID vaccinated. Nope. Because a friend of mine whose son did end up getting one, we surmise because of what happened to him, like the kidney was clotting and he was bleeding out. Like there's no way. And he lost the kidney and he's still back on dialysis. It's a really sad situation, but they won't tell you. They'll tell you if they have HIV. They will tell you if they're a drug user. They will not tell you if the person was COVID vaccinated. So we feel like if, maybe the reason this bill didn't pass is because we need to expand it a little bit and say, like, we need blood donation needs to be marked, like if it was from a vaccinated person or not. And same with organ donation. Like, it's just because in the end, you're almost wasting that organ if it's not going to take, like, and they talk about wasting organs and how many people need organ transplants a year. Then we should do a better job, I feel like, but it's so politically charged, as you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
500,000,000%. And it's
Yes.
just, it's mind blowing, and it really boils my blood because, how could they disclose all of this other information? I mean, like, here's the person's, like, what the person ate yesterday or what, I mean, like, but they're
Yeah.
not going to give something that to me is very important. It's a very
Right.
important thing to disclose, and it's like, well, why? If you don't think it's that big of a deal, why?
Why you're not disclosing
Why
it?
are you not
Exactly.
yeah, like if it's all good and it's all fine, then you should have no problem disclosing it.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Yeah. Like, why are they not telling us?
Exactly.
So we want to try to get this law into other states. That's just essentially where it has to go, but we don't know. And so I'll probably talk about the Facebook page now, just so that we can, like, that's
Please
what
do.
the way I apparently talked about this a year ago, because you listened to Ben Rawls' podcast, that I was going to make a Facebook page that we could have people reach out to us, which I never got around to. I don't know why. I probably got distracted. But came to me literally like 2 days ago. The Holy Spirit was like, you need to make a Facebook page. I'm like, okay, make a Facebook page. So it's called Kidney for Yulia. And if people want to reach out and join that group, there's a lot of stuff. And the goal of that group is has many purposes. One, it's to kind of like keep up to date, like let people know what's going on in the world of people who are being denied. To be a place where people can meet and I can give resources without giving out my personal information. So I do know places people can go to get transplants and other medical care without getting not just the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, but other shots as well. And so I want people to be able to reach out to me, like we said, to save as many lives as possible. And then I feel like it could also be because it would bring people from all over the country. If there's people interested in helping to get a bill in their state, then I would be able to work with them and our lobbyists, and we could really make this, blossom. So that's kind of, and also to pray for kids who are going through transplants. Like I mean, the faith part of it is absolutely connected and it will not be separated. So to pray for these people who are suffering greatly.
Yeah, yeah. And like I told you off air and we've touched on, during this chat, it's like this is not just about transplants. I mean, like you said earlier, you brought up Lexi, for those of you who don't know the story, there's a story going on right now, or not a story, there's a real life situation right now where there's a young woman in UCI Medical Center down in Orange County here in California that was unfortunately a product of coercion with getting and persuaded to get some vaccines. She has a disorder. Came out. I think she came out here. I don't even think that she is from California. Came out here to get a treatment. They pushed these vaccines that were not. They were not COVID. There were some of the other. I think one was tetanus. One was something else.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a massive reaction within 10 minutes. And it has been an absolute explosion of craziness over here. And I'm sure if you guys are on social media, some of you might have been following this story and how horrific it is. And, she's been hanging on to her life. But these are the stories that unfortunately we need to be aware of, because it seems
Yeah.
like we need to be moved dramatically enough to understand how serious this is. And we are literally in the process of losing our rights. And
Yes.
it doesn't if you're somebody, I just want to say this right now while it's fresh, if you're somebody that's like, oh, but the COVID vaccine is amazing and it's that we all need it, and I have all my boosters and I really believe in it, cool, you might believe in it, but what happens down the line when something comes up that you don't believe in? Okay, then you're going to be faced with the same thing that people have been faced with today. So the reality is we all need to understand, and I know Chrissy agrees, that we need to have control over what is put in our
Yeah.
bodies, and we should not be pushed into taking or doing anything. And so that's why laws and bills like, Yulia's law, it needs to get passed because it's so much more. Transplants are incredibly important, but this goes for not just transplants, right? Like we can
Yeah.
really start this conversation beyond, and it's already been started, but that's why things like this are so important.
Yeah. It needs to be a precedent that's set. And my husband has said when he was in a lot of interviews with me, he would say, I fought for 28 years for this country for freedom. And we were denied the freedom to choose what we were putting in our daughter's body. Like that's crazy if you think of it that way. And if we lose that freedom, none of them matter. None of them. If you can't control what they put into your body, you've lost all body autonomy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm super passionate about it also, which is, as soon as we were connected, or, I was like, oh my gosh, like we need to talk. We need to do a discussion about this because it's such a no brainer. And I think they really pull the system, I should say, the establishment, they really pull, on people's emotions. They really use
Yes.
fear as a tactic. And we know how detrimental fear is. And we've watched that unfold over the last several years now, as we've gone through this whole COVID era. And it's just like, it's the enemy's number one tactic. And so
Yes.
we need to switch gears and realize that when we're in a very interesting, very precarious situation, and we have to take it super serious because once those are gone, like you just said, they're gone.
Yes. And we can't get them back. Like there's no way it will and they talk about these passport, what do they want? The
Yeah.
vaccine passports. Like where does it end? Like it's crazy, you
Where does
know?
it end? Yeah, yeah, and we know
Yeah.
it's not done. I mean, they're just we were talking offline, like they just are coming out with the Avion one or whatnot, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
Yeah.
what are they going to do with that? And how?
Yeah.
And I feel like there are a lot of people that are in that have woken up, right? There's a lot of people who are in a different headspace. They've come to literally a lot of truth over the last couple of years, but there's also a lot of people that have not. And there's a lot of criticism with people who are speaking out, but the ones that are speaking out, like you, they're doing it for everybody. They're not just doing it
Right.
for, they're doing it for, we're doing it for all people,
For
despite,
sure.
yeah, because it
People have
really
said to me,
is.
they're like, "Why are you still fighting? Like, why do you care? Your daughter got her transplant." I'm like, "Because it was never about just us." You know what I mean? Like, it never was just about Yulia. It's about all these other kids and people who contact me whose children are in the same boat. Like, we have to stick together to fight this because it's not going away anytime soon.
No, no, it never will. It never will. I don't think. I mean, as long as we're all here, I don't think that we're going to
Yes.
see it completely be eradicated, but we can push for it as much as possible. We can.
Yes.
So you just started this Facebook page. I
Yes.
love it. Literally. And I will definitely list that in the show notes. Are there other and any resources that you share right now? I will be sure, believe me, I will be sure to be posting them all in the show notes so that people can go and reference them. But are there other ways to learn more or to connect with you guys or just learn more about this in general, or maybe they know somebody that maybe is in a predicament? Like, do you have any other resources offhand?
So there is the Facebook page. So that's the first thing that they could reach out there. We also have a Caring Bridge page. I think it's also called Kidney for Yulia. And then we had a Give Send Go / Kidney for Yulia. That's why I kept the same thing. And I've used the Give Send Go more for like putting out. It's easier to do updates on that than it was on like other platforms that I had. And so I'd always go in there and put a lot of updates, especially when we were trying to get people to call their senators and representatives. All that stuff is in there. But any of those places they reach out to me, I will reach back. But please, if you are in this predicament or you know somebody who is, please have them contact me because there are places in America. And I feel like there's more and more waking up that say, no, we cannot deny people for this any longer. Please reach out to us because we do want to be able to help you. And there may be other people in that Facebook page, and that's what I'm hoping for. This is way beyond me, and I'm hoping that God will put people together that can help each other. And like we talked about, like I'm hoping in the end that we will get a nonprofit out of this and we'll be able to have resources readily available. People call in and we'd be able to tell them where to go. That's the long-term goal. I don't know how far away it is. I have to leave that in God's hands. But that is the biggest goal, is to be able to help other people if they need help. And even if people want to let us know other stories that are going on, like it's a conversation, a place to have a conversation.
Well, there's no doubt that, just by looking at the story and the timeline and how everything is so beautifully orchestrated by God up until this point, that if you guys are going to be starting a nonprofit that is going, if that is his
God's
will,
plan.
then that is
Mhm.
absolutely going to happen and you're going to be cared for every step of the way. And as I was telling you again, from the first time that we spoke, it's like I am so on board with however, I mean, even just this little show, whatever I can do to support you guys. You, I was talking, I was talking about today, I was talking earlier this week with a friend and I was just like, wow, I feel like I am getting ready to go into an interview with a real angel on earth, and I mean that. I mean, and we've kind of become fast friends, which is
Yes,
absolutely amazing
very
and
yes.
blessed. And we laughed about it, but it's like, wow, we just clicked right away. But I just want to say, I mean, you just in the short time I've known you, and even before, I mean, I guess I knew of your story, but not necessarily as deep as I know it now. Yeah, I cannot even believe what you have done. I cannot even believe the just the tenacity that you and your husband have had. And I know what you're going to say. And I know you're going to say, I'm not special. God carried us and so forth. You are special, my friend. You are special. And, there's a lot of, you need a lot of courage. You need a lot of fresh wind. You need a lot of just mental and emotional strength to endure a journey of this nature. And you said yes. And that's the thing. We have choices still, right? We have choices that we make. And you said yes. You said yes to Yulia. You said yes to the law. You said yes to speaking out on Tucker. You said yes over and over and over again. And you are such an inspiration. It is such a blessing to know you. And I am so grateful to call you a friend.
Me too, Vanessa. And please, I will, when people see that though, please, all the glory is to God. I mean that deeply from the bottom of my heart. Like we would not be here without God. He has
Yeah.
carried us. So when you see our story, I want people to see, especially now because things are tough in America. I want people to see that God is a God of miracles and he still is working them today. I'm
Absolutely.
sorry.
No, please do not be sorry. Oh my goodness. Friends, I hope that if you get one takeaway and nothing else from the show, you walk away from listening to Chrissy's story and her husband, Chrissy and Lee's story and Yulia's story, knowing that the impossible is possible. I pray that you are inspired and encouraged to not give up even in the hardest of situations. We are looking and listening to a real testimony and a real testimony of faith. And, I am just so honored and humbled to be able to be the tiniest little bridge of a platform to be able to share this beautiful family story with you. And I pray that you walk away just feeling just empowered in the fact that, like, when you have faith, anything is doable, anything is possible, and all glory to God at the end of the day, just like Chrissy said. So,
Amen. All the glory.
all the glory, all the glory. It has been, I mean, what is there left to say? What is there left to say? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. Like I said, I've never met a person I think busier than you with all of the activities and all of the things that you've got going on. You're just an angel. I'm so lucky to know you, and I cannot wait to share your message and Yulia's testimony and your story with our listeners, and they will be blessed as I have been blessed. So thank you, Chrissy. I appreciate you. And yeah, just you're absolutely incredible.
Thank you, Vanessa. I've really enjoyed it too. Thank you for giving us another platform because, like I said, like I felt like it was time to do the victory tour. Like a lot of it was complaints of what happened to us, and now it's time to give all the glory to Him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again. And my friends, we will see you on the next one. Thank you so much for joining us today.